They don't say, I love you the way most people do. No sweet words at the perfect time. No open arms, no steady gaze that says, I'm here and I'm not leaving. What they give, if you look closely, is something far more complex, far more difficult to hold silence where words should be, distance where closeness should thrive, absence in moments that cry out for presence. And yet, somehow there's love. It lives in the unspoken, in the confusion, in the pain that keeps echoing even after the door closes. It lives in the contradictions. How someone can say nothing, yet you still feel everything. How someone can pull away and still pull your heart along with them. How someone can leave and still linger in your soul. Because this isn't a lack of love. This is a love that was never taught how to speak. A love that was trained to hide, to run, to mask itself in defense and withdrawal. It's not gone. It's buried. And instead of blooming, it bruises. Instead of holding, it pushes. The truth is haunting but undeniable. Avoidants hide their love in the very pain they cause. They don't say, I love you. They show it in the only language they know, through distance, through withdrawal, through quiet tests you never agreed to take. They'll disappear just to see if you come looking. They'll go cold just to see if you'll warm them back up. They'll close off, because the more they feel, the more afraid they become. For them, love doesn't equal safety. Love equals exposure. And exposure feels like danger. So what looks like rejection is often protection. Not for you, for them. They're not shutting you out because you're not worthy. They're shutting you out because they don't know if love can last when someone sees all their wounds. But what no one warns you about is what this does to the one who tries to love them. Because when someone hides their love behind a wall of pain, it forces others to become interpreters of silence, seekers of signs, defenders of broken patterns. You end up looking for proof of love in the hurt, trying to decode distance as a sign of depth. You convince yourself that if you just hold on long enough, if you just show up one more time, they'll finally open up, they'll finally say it, they'll finally stay. But every time you inch closer, they step back. Every time you ask for more, they give less. Every time you reach out, they pull inside. And still, you believe, because deep inside the HE, there's something that feels real. And you're right, it is real, but real love, buried under unresolved fear, doesn't feel like a gift. It feels like a wound. There's a kind of heartbreak that doesn't scream. It doesn't break things. It doesn't come with betrayal or lies. It comes with slow confusion. It comes with standing in front of someone who should love you and wondering why you feel so alone. That is the heartbreak of loving someone who hides behind avoidance. And the pain isn't just in their absence, it's in the almost conversations, the almost intimacy, the almost healing. You get just enough to keep hoping, but never enough to feel safe. It's the kind of love that keeps you doubting yourself, because how can someone love you and still keep you at arm's length? How can someone care and still cause this much hate? The answer is found in one brutal truth. They don't know how to love without fear. They don't know how to let someone in without losing themselves. And so they build walls where there should be bridges. They create distance where there should be connection. They inflict pain, not out of malice, but out of habit, out of survival, out of the belief that love must always be earned, never freely given. This is not love that heals, this is love that hides. And it leaves behind a trail of broken hearts. Not because it wasn't real, but because it was never ready. It was never nurtured. It was never shown that love can exist without fear, without defense, without retreat. So understand this, when avoidants pull away, it's not always because they don't love, it's because they do. But the closer love gets, the more unsafe it feels. And instead of leaning in, they vanish, they hurt, they confuse. They leave you carrying the weight of a bond that never got the chance to breathe. And that's where you must begin, not with the pain they caused you, but with the awareness that their love is real, but broken. And broken love, no matter how deep, still cuts. It still costs, because even if they love you in their own way, you deserve a love that doesn't ask you to bleed just to feel it. No one is born afraid of love. That fear is taught, conditioned, etched into the nervous system through experiences that left scars where trust should have grown. The avoidant doesn't wake up one day and choose to withhold, to detach, to turn love into something foreign. That choice, if you can even call it that, was made in survival. Long before they met anyone who wanted to love them, they were trained to see intimacy as a risk. Closeness wasn't comforting, it was dangerous. Vulnerability wasn't freeing, it was a trap. And so they built a reflex out of retreat. They learned that needing someone was weakness, that relying on others was reckless, that showing their feelings was an open invitation for disappointment, for betrayal, for rejection. And so they armored up. Not with malice, with defense, with a desperate attempt to stay in control of something they were never taught to handle connection. You see, emotional distance isn't created in a vacuum. It's born out of moments where expressing love led to pain. Moments when their cries were ignored, their needs minimized, their affection mocked. Moments where love was inconsistent, sometimes present, sometimes withdrawn, teaching them that safety was conditional and affection was unpredictable. So they built walls instead of bonds. They mastered self-reliance, not because it was noble, but because it was necessary. They learned to rely only on themselves, to keep their emotions tight, fisted and their hearts barricaded. To the outside world, they may seem composed, independent, even emotionally strong, but inside, there's a constant tension, a battle between the desire to be close and the compulsion to protect. The craving for intimacy and the terror of exposure, because when someone has spent a lifetime learning that connection equals danger, every step toward love feels like stepping off a cliff. So they freeze, they withdraw, they sabotage, not because they don't care, but because the wiring in their mind says, this is how I stay safe. This is why, when they're overwhelmed by emotion, they go silent. Why they'll shut down just as things start to feel meaningful. Why they'll leave instead of explaining. Why they'll look you in the eyes with affection and then turn away without a word. It doesn't make sense until you understand the root. Avoidants aren't emotionally distant because they lack depth. They're distant because they feel too deeply, too fast, and have no map for how to stay grounded in that depth without losing themselves. So they retreat before the ground can crack beneath them. They control the distance so they don't feel controlled. They minimize attachment to avoid disappointment. It's not about cruelty, it's about fear, and fear doesn't always look like panic or desperation. Sometimes fear looks like silence, like stillness, like someone backing away from love, not because it isn't wanted, but because it's too powerful. The tragedy is that in trying to protect themselves, they end up hurting those who get close. Because the person who loves them doesn't see the inner war. They only feel the withdrawal. They only feel the cold. They only see the closed doors, the missed moments, the blank stare where warmth used to live. And the one on the receiving end starts to question everything. Is it me? Did I do something wrong? Why won't they let me in? But the truth is, it was never about the other person. It's about old wounds, unhealed places, conditioning so deep that even tenderness feels like a threat. It's easy to label them heartless. It's tempting to write them off as emotionally unavailable, disconnected, uncaring. But beneath the surface is someone who's terrified of being fully seen. Because if they're seen, they might be judged. If they're judged, they might be rejected. And if they're rejected, the cycle they try to escape repeats itself. So they preempt the pain. They create distance before anyone can come too close. They shut doors they secretly want to open. Because leaving on their own terms feels safer than being left without warning. That's the origin of emotional distance. It's not apathy, it's armor, it's not arrogance, it's anxiety. It's not detachment, it's damage. And until that fear is faced, until those inner wounds are brought to the light, love will continue to feel like war to them. They'll fight it, push it, avoid it. And the cruelest part, they may love someone deeply, but love alone isn't enough to undo that pattern. Not until they learn that connection doesn't have to cost them safety. Not until they learn that they can be seen and still be safe. Because until that moment comes, they will continue to hide their love in the very pain they cause. Not because they want to, but because it's the only way they've ever known how to feel in control. It's one of the most devastating emotional paradoxes. How can someone love you and still push you away? It's easy to mistake avoidance for indifference. The silence, the retreat, the mixed signals. On the surface, it feels like rejection, like coldness, like they simply don't care. But beneath that surface is something far more complex, far more heartbreaking. Avoidance doesn't mean the absence of love. It means the presence of fear. Not fear of you. Fear of being known. Fear of being needed. Fear of being seen without a mask. Avoidants don't pull away because they feel nothing. They pull away because they feel too much. So much that it floods their system, overwhelms their nervous wiring, and demands that they shut down before they drown. They're not hiding from love. They're hiding from the power of love. The intimacy that threatens to unravel everything they've spent a lifetime protecting. So instead of expressing love, they test it. They withdraw to see if you'll follow. They create distance to see if you'll bridge it. They go silent. Not because they have nothing to say, but because speaking will require vulnerability, and vulnerability still feels like stepping into danger. They don't know how to say, I'm scared. So they act like they don't care. They don't know how to ask for reassurance. So they pretend nothing's wrong. They don't know how to let love in without losing themselves. So they control it, manage it, hide behind logic or detachment or business. And the tragedy, this defense, this instinct to protect themselves is the very thing that makes the person who loves them feel unloved. It turns tenderness into confusion, closeness into tension, desire into doubt. Because when someone craves your presence but responds with distance, when someone needs your love but shrinks away from it, it twists your heart into knots. It teaches you to question the obvious. It convinces you to interpret hurt as depth. It makes you believe that silence means substance. But what you're really experiencing is emotional dysregulation masked as mystery. It's not that they're playing games. It's that their internal world is so overwhelmed by closeness, they don't know how to stay without shutting down. They feel safer in control, and control comes through avoidance. So love becomes something to manage, not something to receive. And what does that do to the one who keeps trying? It forces them into the role of decoder. They start reading into every message, every delay, every sigh, every distant glance. They stop asking for what they need in fear of pushing the avoidant further away. They settle for fragments, moments of softness, rare glimpses of warmth, and treat them like proof that love still exists in the space between. And yes, sometimes it does. But those fragments can't build a future. They can't hold you at night. They can't communicate. They can't grow. They are remnants of love that's still buried, still scared, still learning to breathe without flinching. And so the person on the receiving end of that love begins to bend. They hold more than their share. They speak more than they're heard. They chase more than they're met. And little by little, they disappear inside the needs of someone who doesn't know how to hold them fully. That is what misunderstood love does. It wears the mask of deep connection, but it lacks consistency. It feels like intensity, but it lacks stability. It looks like love, but it hurts like longing. Because true love doesn't feel like uncertainty. It doesn't hide behind confusion or withdrawal. It doesn't force one person to carry all the emotional weight while the other disappears into silence. Avoidants love in a way that's often misunderstood by others and by themselves. They don't realize that their silence is deafening, that their coldness stings more than honesty ever could, that their distance speaks louder than words. And most of all, they don't realize that the person trying to love them is breaking, not because the love isn't there, but because it's never given the chance to be seen, nurtured, or held. So what happens next? One of two things. Either the avoidant begins to face their fears, to open, to soften, to allow love in without shutting down, or the person loving them begins to wake up, to recognize that this pattern, no matter how meaningful it feels, is unsustainable. That love shouldn't have to hurt just to feel real. That being confused all the time isn't a sign of depth, it's a sign of emotional misalignment. Because no matter how deeply someone feels, if they can't express it, share it, or stand in it with you, then love becomes a wound, not a bond. And even the deepest feelings mean nothing when they're locked away behind silence and fear. There's a kind of heartbreak that doesn't come from being left. It comes from staying in something that never fully arrives, in love that never fully speaks, in connection that never fully lands. It's the heartbreak of loving someone who can't meet you in the space you keep creating for them. Someone who stands just close enough to keep hope alive, but far enough to never let it grow. Someone who leaves the door cracked open just enough to keep you waiting outside, and waiting becomes a way of life. You start learning how to measure love by the smallest gestures, a text reply, a brief glance, a soft word before another long silence. Moments that should be normal become milestones, and the standards slowly collapse. You begin to live off of breadcrumbs. You start calling distance space. You call inconsistency emotional complexity. You label silence as empathy, but deep down your heart knows the difference, because you feel it in the pit of your stomach, in the tightness in your chest, and the way you keep second-guessing your worth every time they pull away again. You try to be patient. You try to be understanding. You try to hold the entire relationship together with your hope alone. But eventually that kind of emotional labor starts to tear into your soul, because you're not just loving them. You're also holding space for their fear, for their withdrawal, for their silence. And you do it quietly, telling yourself this is what love looks like when someone's healing. But what about you? Who holds you while you're holding everything? Who sees you when your own needs shrink smaller every time you're told? It's just how they are. Who comforts you when your heart is tired of justifying emotional abandonment? Because that's what this is. Emotional abandonment dressed as restraint, and it hurts. Not in loud, dramatic ways, but in slow, eroding ones. You begin to feel invisible in the presence of someone you care about. You start to question your own emotional responses, wondering if you're being too much for simply wanting consistency. You shrink to fit their comfort. You silence your needs to protect their wounds. You start asking for less. Not because you need less, but because you've been trained to believe that needing more is unsafe for them. And this is where the damage begins to echo. Not just in the relationship, but in you. You begin to disconnect from your own inner voice. You trade honesty for harmony. You learn to walk on eggshells, tiptoeing around triggers you didn't create. And slowly, almost invisibly, your self-worth begins to erode. Because love, when it's one-sided effort, becomes a burden, not a bond. Avoidant patterns don't just affect the person who holds them. They radiate outward like ripples in water, touching and reshaping the lives of everyone around them. And the one who loves the avoidant often becomes the one who carries the emotional cost. They become the safe place for someone who offers no safety in return. They become the emotional container holding sadness, confusion, frustration, and longing all at once. And the longer they stay, the more they begin to disappear into that role. But love should never cost someone their wholeness. It should never teach someone to lower their voice to avoid shaking another person's walls. It should never demand silence, invisibility, or emotional starvation as proof of loyalty. Because that's not love. That's emotional survival. That's trauma dressed in devotion. And still, the one who stays often holds on to hope. Hope that the avoidant will change. Hope that love will soften their defenses. Hope that one day all the silent sacrifices will finally be seen. But hope becomes heavy when it's not met with action. It becomes a chain, not a light. It begins to hurt more than it helps. And this is where a truth must be faced. Staying in a relationship that only exists in fragments doesn't prove strength. It slowly destroys it. Because when someone keeps hiding their love behind pain, and you keep accepting the pain as proof of love, you begin to believe that love must hurt in order to be real. And that belief follows you into your thoughts, into your next connections, into how you see yourself. This is the echo, the internalized damage, the silent harm that lingers long after the relationship ends, if it ever does. But recognizing this pattern is the beginning of power, because damage that is seen can be healed. Pain that is acknowledged can be processed, and cycles that once held you hostage can finally be broken. There comes a moment, quiet, sobering, often painful, when something inside finally whispers, this isn't love anymore. This is survival. It doesn't happen in a dramatic explosion. It happens after one too many silent nights, one too many unanswered questions, one too many times where you found yourself apologizing for simply needing clarity, consistency, affection. That whisper grows louder. It cuts through the confusion, through the rationalizations, through the hope that has been stretched so thin it barely holds its shape. And that whisper becomes a truth. You can't keep losing yourself in someone else's fear. No matter how deep the love feels, no matter how strong the connection was at its peak, no matter how many reasons you've told yourself to stay, there comes a moment when the cost becomes too high. Not because you stopped caring, but because you started waking up. Because love should never ask you to shrink. It should never train you to be silent. It should never teach you that your needs are a burden or that your desire for emotional safety is too much. It should never feel like a chase where every step forward is met with another wall, where you keep showing up and they keep disappearing. This awakening is not fueled by anger. It's not rooted in bitterness. It's clarity. And clarity is what emerges when denial finally breaks. It's the moment you stop defending their behavior and start protecting your peace. It's the moment you realize that empathy does not require self-sacrifice. That understanding their pain doesn't mean you must endure it. That compassion can exist and still walk away. Because here's the hard truth. You cannot love someone into healing if they are not willing to face their own wounds. You cannot become soft enough, quiet enough, loyal enough to make them feel safe in a world they've trained themselves to fear. You can't give more of yourself to fix a pattern that was never yours to repair. And what's worse, if you stay too long in that pattern, you begin to forget what love is supposed to feel like. You confuse instability for passion. You confuse absence for mystery. You confuse emotional starvation for strength. But strength isn't about how much pain you can endure. Strength is about knowing when to stop normalizing what's hurting you. It's about reclaiming your voice after silencing it for so long. It's about realizing that you are not here to carry someone's emotional baggage while yours continues to grow heavier. At some point, you must choose not between loving them or not, but between continuing to abandon yourself or finally coming home to who you really are, because staying doesn't prove your worth. Letting go does, not out of coldness, not as revenge, but as a declaration. I will not lose myself trying to keep someone else from making me. This is the awakening, when self-love stops being a concept and becomes a decision. When boundaries start feeling like walls and start feeling like doors. To freedom, to clarity, to emotional health. When walking away isn't running, it's returning. Return to a version of you that no longer tolerates half love, no longer settles for someone who only shows up on their terms, no longer accepts confusion as chemistry, no longer mistakes emotional detachment for depth. The choice must be made. Because love, when it's one-sided in healing, becomes hollow. And staying in the hope that they'll change only delays the moment you choose yourself. And yes, it's terrifying to let go of something you cared so deeply for. To walk away from someone you once thought was the one. To say goodbye to a version of love you fought so hard to keep alive. But what's even more terrifying, staying so long that you forget how to be whole. Giving so much that there's nothing left of you to give. Teaching your heart that pain is just part of being close to someone. No, that's not love. That's emotional depletion. You are not asking for too much. You are asking for the minimums. Truth, presence, consistency, effort. And if someone cannot meet you there, it is not your job to lower the bar. This is your line in the sand, not drawn in anger, but drawn in sacredness. The moment you say, I will not keep proving I'm worthy of love. I already am. This is it. The moment everything shifts. Not because someone came to rescue you. Not because the person you love finally woke up. Not because the pain magically stopped. But because something inside of you, quiet, tired, and long silence, it has finally stood up and said, no more. No more waiting for love to feel safe. No more translating silence into meaning. No more shrinking so someone else can feel secure in their emotional walls. No more trying to decode mixed signals and empty words, hoping that love will somehow be waiting on the other side of confusion. Because real love, it doesn't hide. It doesn't punish. It doesn't manipulate or test or vanish when things get real. Real love holds you when you're honest. Real love invites truth. Real love shows up, not just in the good moments, but in the hard ones. Real love doesn't need you to perform emotional gymnastics just to feel seen. And if that's not what you've been receiving, it's time to stop calling it love. It may have come wrapped in longing. It may have been tangled in soul-deep chemistry. It may have felt powerful, intoxicating, even sacred. But if it left you drained, doubting, and disconnected from yourself, then it wasn't love. It was a lesson. And lessons don't need to become legacies. You don't have to carry the pain forward. You don't have to wear this chapter like a badge or a scar. You don't have to keep proving that you were loyal to someone who was loyal only to their fear. There is no reward in staying small. There is no honor in staying quiet. There is no healing in staying stuck. Let this be the moment you draw a hard line with your past. A moment where you don't just walk away from what's hurting you, you run toward what can heal you. Because healing isn't found in waiting for someone to love you differently. Healing begins the moment you decide that you deserve more. More than mixed messages, more than late night tears and unanswered texts, more than emotional distance dressed as mystery. You deserve consistency. You deserve to feel chosen fully, openly, without hesitation. Not just when it's convenient. Not just when you're quiet. Not just when you're easy to love. And this time, the choosing starts with you. Choose to stop abandoning yourself. Choose to stop explaining your worth. Choose to stop shrinking so others don't feel threatened by your depth. Choose the version of you that doesn't beg for clarity. The version that walks away when energy isn't matched. The version that remembers, I am not hard to love. I was just loving someone who couldn't see me. And yes, it's going to hurt. Letting go always does. There will be moments where you miss them, not because they were good for you, but because their absence creates silence where chaos used to live. You'll grieve what could have been. You'll mourn the love you offered. You'll ache for closure that may never come. But eventually the ache softens. The fog clears. And the silence, it stops feeling like loneliness. It starts feeling like space. Room to breathe. Room to remember yourself. Room to rebuild. Because who you are after this is someone who doesn't settle. Someone who doesn't perform for love. Someone who doesn't need to be small to feel safe. You become someone powerful, rooted and apologetically clear. No longer hoping someone will choose you because you've already chosen yourself. So let this be more than an ending. Let it be your becoming. Let it be the moment you stepped out of the cycle, out of the shadow, out of the storm, and into your truth. You are not hard to love. You are not asking for too much. You are not broken. You are not invisible. You are just trying to love someone who didn't know how to receive love without running. And that's not your burden to carry anymore. Stand up. Speak up. Choose yourself with the kind of certainty you once reserved for others. And remember, the kind of love that won't hurt you for needing it exists. But you'll only find it when you stop mistaking emotional starvation for devotion. When you stop loving others the way you were never loved. This is not the end. It's the beginning of everything real. So take the pain, take the lesson, take the truth, and turn it into power. Turn it into freedom, because you're not here to be a prisoner of someone else's fear. You're here to rise.